Right. Okay. I'm gonna tell you. Shh, stop. I'm gonna tell you the homework, and then for those of you at home, it is mandatory that you go ahead and take a picture of the answers on your note cards and send it to me before you go through this lesson and make your corrections. I need to see what your note cards look like right now. So please take a picture and send to me. Okay. Here is the homework. You have no homework over spring break. Oh, sorry, I have to show this. You have no homework over spring break. However, you will have an in-class test on Wednesday, April 12th, which is 2 weeks from today. It is pretty soon after returning from spring break, so I need to give you the heads up about this. I am providing for you 3 different ways, actually, to supplement studying for this test. When this class ends, on your Google Classroom, there will post a post that has 2 things in it to help you study. One is the note cards. You do not need to send me a photo of anything. It's there for everybody. I'm checking your note cards in class today, and everyone has access to the note card spreadsheet. So that is posted. Also, I have made and posted a Quizlet for you. It's on Google Classroom. If you've never used Quizlet, it's an online way of using flashcards. I know it's not foolproof because if you're doing it with your own flashcards, you can go back to front, front to back, but at least it's something that can make it easy electronically to practice your note cards. The Quizlet link to flashcards, it loads for flashcards, but if you've ever used Quizlet, you can switch to a different format. And when I was looking at it, I liked the format of, it's called matching. If you do matching, then it loads both sides of the note cards for maybe like 10 note cards at a time. And then you drag and connect like a memory game. You drag and connect one note card to the front and the back. And when they connect, then poof, they disappear. And it sort of limits your options. So it's just different ways that you can practice your note cards as preparation for the upcoming test. Before I go on to the virtual class day, does anyone have questions about the different test review things that I've posted for you? Okay. Yes?
I have a comment about Quizlet.
Mm-hmm.
You actually can flip your note cards.
Oh, you can change it? Okay. Good. Look in your options. Okay. On Monday, April the 10th, we have a virtual review day. The whole day is committed to reviewing for our test. So there will be no new material on this test. By today, we've covered everything that's on the test. Our virtual review day, instead of having everybody show up at your class time, the virtual review day, my plan is to have 2 different times for you to come on. And you can do this with siblings. You can show up on either one of these options, 9 o'clock or 10:30. If I get a large number of emails from people who say, I actually have live classes at both of those times, then I would consider adding another time. However, I don't know that all your teachers are going to be doing live classes. I kind of doubt that. So double check with your teachers who's doing what when. And then the idea is that basically people from all of my classes can choose one or the other of these times. Yes, Madeline?
I do think most of our teachers.
Really?
Yeah. But I think
Well, you'll have to do
At least, yeah,
I think
all of
science
them that
is-
I know of, I haven't had anyone
Except Miss Wilson.
Except for Miss Wilson.
She was
They
the
hate
class.
And math classes rarely last the whole time.
Yeah, but
They don't last for now.
She usually is like at the very end.
Well, you guys need to figure it out from your teachers and send me an email. Yes?
Most of this class will probably be at 10:30 because we're doing science.
Mm-hmm.
Virtual, which is at 9.
Wait, are we actually doing?
Yeah.
She said we're doing
You know, we have Spanish.
some of us have Spanish.
Yeah, and she said we're
Okay.
doing that. Four
The
of us can't make it.
okay, but also what I'm doing as a review game will also be posted. It's not like if there's just a couple of people who can't make it, it's not the end of the world. I'm not taking attendance. This is for your sake to help you with reviewing. So this is how you do it. You join the class by going through Google Meet and using the code word history, just like you always do for my classes. One or the other times. When you do that, I want you to open up not another tab, but another window. Do you guys know the difference between a tab and a window?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't know how to access this, go when you're in Safari, Firefox, Chrome, whatever you use, go up to the file menu. Click on the file menu, it drops down and there's an option that says new window. The reason I want you to open up another window is because in another window you're going to go on this website, Kahoot.com. And you're going to be able to minimize the window, not minimize, you're going to be able to sort of shrink down the windows so that you can have the two windows side by side on your screen. That way you will both be able to see Google Meet and be able to see the screen for Kahoot. You've got to see the screen for Kahoot in order to play the game. And while I guess you could do it with two different tabs, why not try to do it this way so that you can see not only here but also see. Yes, Matt?
Also, you can use an external display. If you have two displays side by side, you have Kahoot open on one and Google open on
Yeah,
one.
and there's ways on iPads to do this a little differently. I'll send out a little bit of tech help to your parents or by email, but it's always better if you can figure it out yourself rather than trying to make your parents do that for you.
I know.
Yes, Sam?
Is it
Is it what? It's not case specific for the codes. So, as long as you spell the word right, you'll get there.
Wait, so you will like email us our code?
There's no, it's history. It's the word history. You just type history in. That's it. So you're going to have those two windows open. If you want to do a phone as well as a device, that's fine. It'll work. It's not necessary to do that, but you can. Like, it'll work on a phone too. Any questions about this? Yes, sorry?
My internet like 3 times.
Okay, so this is not mandatory. This is a review day and a review game for your test on Wednesday, and it's in your best interest to join me. If you have a lot of mandatory online classes, you probably should go someplace where your internet's better.
I got you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Today we are going to start our class with our opening prayer is actually going to be a Black spiritual. You can cut the lights there, Sam. The Black church has a history of the spirituals being a big part of their history. The spirituals are songs that have their roots during the times of slavery, and the themes are often about freedom, not only physical freedom from slavery, but also the freedom, spiritual freedom. We would say like the freedom we have in Christ or the freedom that comes from salvation. There's a lot of crossover in the imagery. There's also oftentimes a lot of talk in the Negro spirituals about heaven, about redemption, about one day when God will make everything right, when all of the world is set right. Those are major themes, and a lot of and about suffering. I should add that in too. Definitely about suffering. So a lot of the themes of these songs are themes that reflected the slave roots. However, in the civil rights movement, these were carried over. Turn it off. And I want you to listen to this song and notice the words that have the main words down here and see some of the images that were part of this. And it kind of warms us up for our lesson on civil rights. Sorry, a minute.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. Over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my own grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more weeping, don't you know? No more weeping. No more weeping over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my own grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. I'm going home to my Lord and be
Oh, come on, guys.
Okay. You can turn the lights back on. That's our warm up for what we're going to be talking about today after our quiz. Let me just briefly tell you the only point I want to make about the field trip. We have a virtual day on a Monday. We have a in-class test on a Wednesday. The field trip is on the Friday. All that stuff is happening the same week. That's when April the 14th is. So that's the day. Everything else I've already told you about. Picnic options and whatnot. It's time for a map quiz. You do not need a piece of paper. In order to increase the speed of the map quiz, it's a matching map quiz. Also, all of the words are in alphabetical order. If you're at home right now, you need to get the map quiz from your mom or dad. Yes? There is a bonus opportunity. Let me tell you, though, first about this. They're all in alphabetical order. The numbers are kind of in order across, sort of. And if you have trouble with flipping letters in your brain, please watch out for Libya and Liberia. Please notice, they do start the same way. So just make sure you read to the end. Yeah, I guess Nigeria. Except Nigeria on different lines. And Libya and Liberia right next to each other. That's why I want you to watch out for the L's. There is going to be a bonus opportunity. Everyone has your cards out for me to check. There's a bonus opportunity, and I'm going to tell you what it is right now, and I do not want anybody to say anything afterwards. In my first class, they responded to me by shouting out answers, so please don't do that. To ask if those were the right kinds of things to write. So don't do that because you'll be giving answers to other people. The question that is for bonus is I want you to write down one fun fact that I told you about one of the African countries. Now, please don't put like Ivory Coast is on the coast. That was a geography thing to help you remember where it was. I want you to think about the stuff when I was telling you about the different things about different countries. See if you can remember anything. You can get 100 without writing that, so don't worry about it if you don't know anything. When you get this quiz, you may begin working. When you finish, flip it over. Do not raise your hand or talk to me. It's going to take me a little while to go through these note cards and make sure I've checked everything. So just wait it out, please. No questions, right? You don't need to ask a question about the bonus. All right, all the quizzes are in. Thank you. If you're at home, you should be finished by now. And we're going to start our class with a fun quiz. Fun-ish quiz. I'm going to see if you guys know the answers to this. This is a no points quiz. Let's raise your hand if you want to answer. What do you know about Martin Luther King Jr.? I will pause and say this is a lesson about Martin Luther King Jr., ostensibly, but basically it's about the civil rights movement. Yes?
What is ostensibly?
It was a vocab word.
Yes,
but not. It was like,
Sort of.
I don't remember that.
It means like so we say.
It was like retaining to
In
without
name.
not
In
actually.
name it's about Martin Luther King Jr., but in reality it's about a lot more than
It was
Martin
actually a
Luther King Jr.
vocab word in English.
Excellent. That's a very good
It was also
vocabulary.
very
This-
hard.
I don't
remember
remember that.
You could have used my sentence. This is ostensibly about Martin Luther King Jr., but actually it's about the civil rights movement.
That
That
would
would've
have
worked
been,
better.
but she would have translated like it's not like Martin Luther King Jr. It's just like
It's not just about it's about much more than Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, but the thing is, you have to make it clear she can't take any other way.
Okay.
Anyway.
Then maybe you shouldn't have used that. Raise your hand if you'd like to answer this. Where was Dr. King born? Alabama, Georgia, Massachusetts, or Virginia?
Georgia.
Georgia is correct. Before getting involved in the civil rights movement, was he a lawyer, preacher, doctor, or actor? Sam? Preacher is correct. Dr. King believed in progress through nonviolent means. His important influence was Mahatma Gandhi, JFK, Abraham Lincoln, or Malcolm X.
I think it's Malcolm X.
Gandhi is correct.
No, it's Malcolm X.
What legislation was passed in 1964 as a result? Was it the 14th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, Social Security Act, or the Voters' Rights Act? Civil Rights Act is correct. And how did, this one is for you if you want an easy one. How did Martin Luther King Jr. die? A car bomb, a heart attack, cancer, or assassination, Brody? Assassination, thank you.
Cancer. Obviously.
All right, like I said, we are talking today. Remember, you're being recorded. Let's have Sam. No background noise because it makes it hard for the recording. What Baptist minister? All right, obviously we're talking about Martin Luther King Jr. with this one. So he was. Shh, Trey, don't talk. Don't just talk to yourself. Record it. Okay, don't talk out loud though. Look without talking. The Baptist minister who was the most visible leader of the American Civil Rights Movement in the 50s and 60s, Dr. King. There is one of you who skipped the junior part. He is known as Martin Luther King Jr. And I think that it would be in your best interest to make sure you have his name correct. Yes, Matt?
Isn't that because he was named after his dad, who's Martin Luther King, who was named after Martin Luther?
Well, being named after Martin Luther, yes, like in a sense. Okay, guys, look at this picture. Do you recognize him? If you were to see a picture, would you recognize this as Dr. King?
Yes.
Just checking. He is iconic in American history. You ought to be able to recognize a photo of Dr. King. Yes.
Why is he a doctor?
What was his doctorate in?
Theology.
Yeah, I think theology. I'm going to start with a quote from Dr. King. Here's a quote from him. Commit yourself to the noble struggle for equal rights. You will make a greater person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in. You guys think that's true?
Yes.
Do you think that having equal rights for all people makes the world a better place.
Nah, it's terrible.
It makes the world better. It makes the world in general better. If you do not care about people who suffer discrimination and people who suffer from racism or something like that, then you're not making the world better. You're just being selfish. You're thinking first about yourself. So I think his quote is a reminder for us to live a little bit more selflessly, to be more others oriented. And if we are aware of things that are showing discrimination or bias, we ought to care, because it's part of just being humans, being citizens, and recognizing and caring about the Imago Dei, the image of God in each person. Okay, that's our starting point. Let's get to the nitty-gritty of the civil rights movement. There have been a lot of laws passed in our nation's history. The ones at the top of this list, you guys remember because we've already talked about them. The Emancipation Proclamation happened during what?
Civil War.
During the Civil War. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. That happened during the Civil War. Shortly after the Civil War, 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were passed. You guys remember this from when we studied this?
Yes.
Okay. Now, look at the dates on this. The first Civil Rights Act that was passed was in 1866. How long after the Civil War is this?
Like
10 years.
Do you remember the dates of the Civil War? You're supposed to have learned
I only have
these.
one or 7 and 1.
Sam.
Completely different target. It shouldn't be Imago Dei. It should be
Okay.
Imago Dei.
Does anybody remember when the Civil War finished?
So, like, 1865.
What did you say? Thank you, Wesley.
74.
What did you say?
1865.
1865. So the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was how long after the Civil War?
year.
Guys, come on.
Weird.
1 year. 1 year after. No, of the Civil War. Soren, you're being recorded. You're causing background noise. Keep the focus together. The first Civil Rights Act was 1866. The second one was in 1870. So how many years after the Civil War is this one?
5. 5, guys. 5.
5 years after the Civil War, we already have a problem with the Ku Klux Klan. There was another one in 1871, a second Ku Klux Klan Act. A third Ku Klux Klan Act after that. And then there's the Civil Rights Act of 1875. How long after the Civil War? You know? What were you going to ask?
10.
Why is it named Ku Klux?
I don't know the answer to that.
well,
It was 10 years after. 10 years after the after the war. And then look at this. Civil Rights Act of 1875. The next one, 1957.
That's like 75 years.
What in the world happened in American history between 1875 and 1957? No. In terms of the attempt to create a more equal nation, what happened was actually that America took a big old U-turn and really stopped progress in the right direction and went the wrong direction. Progress in the right direction looked like this. Directly after the Civil War, the amendments gave black people the right to vote. They were freed from slavery. They were given the right to vote. They voted in large numbers. They elected black legislators. This was happening throughout the nation. There was movement in this direction, including an attempt to create more equality in the South by something that was called, it starts with an R. Yes? No, this is
Reconstruction.
Reconstruction was supposed to help bring the South back into the Union and sort of fix some of the problems. Reconstruction was a disaster. And don't just talk out loud. Talk to the class or don't talk to yourself. Reconstruction caused a lot of trouble. And eventually, all of this was put on hold. And instead, we end up with enshrined in our nation's laws, the Jim Crow laws, which we'll talk about. There was almost no movement. In fact, there was like backwards movement until the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s finally had some gains in terms of legislation through civil rights acts. Yes, Michael?
That was like over 75 years in between those.
It's a long time. There was another Civil Rights Act in 1960. There was another one in 1964, which Martin Luther King Jr. was directly related to. But after that, there was another Voting Rights Act in 65, a Housing Act in 68. Housing. What was wrong with housing? The what? What were you saying?
They probably the people selling the houses weren't like giving the actual houses to black people.
There was an attempt to keep housing segregated through practices that wouldn't allow black people to buy houses in neighborhoods that were primarily white.
Making it overly expensive.
No, worse than that. And we'll talk about that when we pull back to this issue in a couple of months. Yes?
The Ku Klux Klan acts were those to stop,
Stop bad things the Ku Klux Klan was doing.
so the first one they made, they weren't like, stop killing black people. They were just like, so if they needed three, there was like three.
There was
different
bad
things.
stuff going on, but we're going to come back to what was happening in the 1920s, which is more related to this. And then in 1970s there were amendments. So let me ask you this: we said that was what was happening with housing. What about voting? The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments gave the right to vote to black people. What happened? Why did it become a problem where black people needed new laws to help them have access to voting? Ben?
Because the people in charge of the voting stations, they were made to make tests, and if you didn't have a certain education, you weren't allowed to take tests. And most of the tests were like trick questions. They were meant to be fair.
Yes. So it was both tests and it was something called poll taxes. Poll taxes are exactly what you think. Some places, they were legally allowed to do this. Some places would charge money and they could vary how much money they charged based off of whatever they wanted. So if you had someone who was racist that didn't want black people to vote, they could charge them too much, or black people made a lot less money, so they might not have been able to pay it. That's the poll tax thing. The test that Ben's referring to is what I'm going to show you a quick video about. But think of it this way. Let's say there's somebody that wants to keep black people from voting, which happened a lot in the South. Let's say some white person comes in. Okay, they have to take a test too. Here's your test. What's the name of your country? Okay, you get to vote now. A black person comes in and wants to register to vote, and it's entirely different. Cut the lights, please. This is a movie clip.
You work for Mr. Dunn down at the rest home, ain't that right? Yes. Wonder what old Dunn will say when I tell him one of his gals down here starting a fuss.
I ain't stirring no fuss. I'm just here trying to register to vote.
Recite the Constitution's preamble. You know what the preamble is?
We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union.
How many county judges in Alabama?
67.
Made them.
He just asked her to name all the county judges in Alabama. She knew that there were 67 of them, but that was too much. Lights on, Sam. After the laws were passed for voting rights, there were more. Voting Rights Act of 1975, Voting Rights Act was passed in the 1980s.
20s.
Civil Rights Restoration in 1987. Another Housing Act in 1988. There was a Civil Rights Act in 1991. Another Voting Rights Act after 2000 in 2006. And there is always sitting on the books, even today, an attempt to pass another Voting Rights Act in our Congress.
What is the voting act?
But I'm not going to get into what it is. You can talk to your parents about what they're debating at the moment. All I'm trying to say is that the issues of fairness and access and equality are still issues that people debate today. It's not just history. So let's go back to an earlier time and talk about something that was truly evil. The Ku Klux Klan and Blythe.
The terrorist organization by white
Supremacist.
supremacists.
Yeah, supremacist.
Okay, known for hiding their identity with white hooded costumes and setting crosses ablaze in the mall.
Yes. The Ku Klux Klan had been around right after the Civil War, and then it experienced a revival in about 1915 after it had been sort of pushed down. Why were they wearing hoods, Sam?
Well, because they get arrested because the Ku Klux Klan.
They were trying to hide their identity, right, by wearing hoods. Right. Do you guys know what lynching is when it says that they would beat, lynch, and attack black people? Do y'all know the word lynching?
I've
Okay.
heard about the word is.
Okay. So lynching is when a mob of people who do not have police powers go and for some reason they think a person has done something bad. Oftentimes it was like, we think this black man was hanging out with a white woman. That happened a lot for lynching. But it could be anything that they think that somebody is doing wrong. This happened a lot in the South too. But a mob of people go and they decide they are going to enact justice by executing publicly somebody for something that they have not processed through the judicial system. So a lynch mob would take somebody out of their homes, beat them up, torture them, often hang them on a tree in a public spot and leave their body. As a warning to anybody else who might do what this person was accused of doing. Yeah, there's other things they could do. It was a horrible part of our nation's history. And you might wonder, don't people know, cut the lights for a minute, don't people know who's doing this? Ultimately, yes. People pretty much knew. But oftentimes the people who were under these hoods were themselves officials. They could have been the judges. They could have been people in political office. And they are super scary looking, aren't they? Most of them claimed to be Christians. They often used Bible verses and Christian images as part of their things, and they burned crosses. Please don't ask me to explain this. It's just kind of a terrible part of our nation's history. Like I said, there was an experience of a revival of the Ku Klux Klan in 1920, peaking in 1915 to 1925. This is a silent film, but you see 40,000 people without hoods on. They have little white peaked hats, but no hoods, and they are celebrating their, say it's a men's organization, so they're celebrating their participation in the KKK with a march in Washington, D.C., 40,000 strong. This was intended to create an atmosphere of fear among people who might not do what the majority culture or the power, the culture that held power said was the right thing to do.
Wonderful.
Trying to what?
They look like a garden though.
Yeah. So it is sad to me that both anti-Semitism, after we've talked about the Holocaust, Both anti-Semitism and racism in the form of even stuff as extreme as the KKK has reemerged again publicly in recent years. This is a 2017 rally at University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia, which was a white supremacist rally and also included some people flying and celebrating KKK causes. Okay, lights back on. Sorry, I'm showing the answer, but I'll just go this. The Jim Crow laws are segregation laws. Look at your card. If you do not have the word segregation on your card, it needs to be there. That is the point of the question. What does segregation mean? Do you know, Lois?
Separating white and black.
Separation, yeah. Segregation is separation. And in this case, it was, like she said, separating black people and white people. Segregation laws in America were part of our laws. They required black Americans to ride on the back of the bus. The bus thing, think of it like this. It was, and people use the buses a lot. If white people needed the seats, then black people had to even stand in the back of the bus. And just because I want you to feel how crazy this is, if a teenage white man got on the bus and there is some older black woman who's been working all day sitting down, but a white guy gets on the bus, she has to stand up and move so he can have the seat. Just think about how utterly backwards that is of everything that your parents have taught you. Yes, Lois?
Do you think any white people would allow them to remain?
Sure. Yes.
Do you think they would be corrected?
Sometimes they were told, like, it was the culture. They were told by the bus driver, you need to move. So, no, like, they could have sat there, and there probably are people who would have allowed them to sit there, but when your whole culture is shaping something, you probably just want to stay under the radar and not cause trouble, is what it comes down to. Separating people into different schools. Now, they would have said these are separate but equal. Were they equal? No, the resources were completely different. The buildings were different. They all had buildings and teachers, but it would have been a completely different experience. Something about water. Black people aren't allowed to go into white people's swimming pools, water fountains, restrooms. Dining, even if they have the money, you can't eat in a dining hall that's aimed at white people. Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, even if that's
lights.
wouldn't you want people to come to your restaurant?
No, I don't think so. This was how important segregation was in this world. So these are real historical signs I want to show you. Drinking fountain, the white is here, the colored is there. Point of this one is to show you it wasn't only black people who suffered discrimination. We served whites only, no Spanish or Mexicans. Waiting room for colored only by order of the police department. The Imperial Laundry Company, we wash clothes for white people only. More Jim Crow laws. I want to start at the bottom. This is from Nebraska. Marriages are void when one party, yes?
Does anybody have 2:30 English with Mrs. Wayne or Mrs. Pilson? Okay.
I think that's my next class.
You need to go see her before you leave the building, please. Okay?
I'll tell the next class too.
Thank you.
In Nebraska, marriages are void when one party is a white person and the other is possessed of 1/8 or more Negro, Japanese, or Chinese blood. No, even if you're a mixed race person, you're not allowed to marry a white person. This was the law of the land in, I think it was Alabama until the 2000s. Crazy late. No colored barber shall serve as a barber to white women or girls. Haircut. It shall be unlawful for any white prisoner to be handcuffed or otherwise chained or tied to a Negro prisoner. Even prisoners weren't equal. That was Arkansas. And from Birmingham, Alabama, it shall be unlawful for a Negro and white person to play together or in company with each other in a game of cards, dice, dominoes, or checkers. Unlawful. And in our own state, the Virginia state law requires all colored passengers to ride in the rear of the bus. You guys all know Rosa Parks. She's really well known. She was part of the civil rights movement. She was not a tired woman who couldn't get out of her seat. She was a brave woman who wanted to be part of a civil rights movement, who intended to get arrested in some sense so that her case could go on to help change the laws. And this is Rosa Parks herself. I'll just show you a little short bit of this.
100 days after Emmett Till's murder, 42-year-old Rosa Parks is riding in the black section of a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, when a white man boards. All the white seats are taken.
The driver demanded that I give the seat up for a white man. I didn't feel that I was being treated as a human being. I refused to give up the seat. I said no, and I wouldn't give it up.
I'm going to move on from that to say that this did cause a court case that helped to bring awareness, but it was really these organizations like, you pronounce this one NAACP, that's how you say it, NAACP, and then there's another one that I wanted you to know the organizations. So in the time that the bus boycott happened, it wasn't just laws, it was boycotts that helped change the laws. In the time of the bus boycott, typically this is what it looked like. Even well-to-do people didn't have cars necessarily, so lots of people used public transportation. The boycott encouraged up to 30,000 people to not use the bus, just to walk to work, even if it was hours and hours and miles. So the buses, instead of looking like what I first told you, they looked like this. And the bus line went broke. It actually failed because they weren't making enough money. So the boycott, which was doing nothing illegal, people are allowed to not use the bus if they don't want to, caused a change in the laws, but it made people angry. People avoiding the bus thing, the anger that got stirred up. Black churches were burned. Martin Luther King Jr.'s house was bombed. Rosa Parks got hundreds of death threats. And this was the beginning of Martin Luther King Jr. leading people in the civil rights movement to use nonviolent protest in order to enact change. This Birmingham March in 1963 is when Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. I'll have to send you the link to that one. But in this, look at these crazy things he's demanding. Black people should have access to public water fountains, restrooms, and lunch counters. If you've ever seen Hidden Figures, it's like that.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
It's an amazing movie. More black people should be hired for jobs in the city. And a committee full of black and white people should be able to talk about the issues that come up. He's not asking for anything crazy. Over 250,000 people showed up for his speech. It was called I Have a Dream. It's a great speech. I'll send you a link to it. Now listen, the Civil Rights Act, the first one that was, or the third one that was passed in 1964, did not address voting rights. It did not address the housing problems, and it did not address poverty. But it did address equality in schools, factories, hotels, restaurants, and theaters. Yay! Now we're going to have equality in schools, right? The problem is that laws cannot change what? What did you say? It cannot change public opinion. It cannot change what's inside of a person. It did not stop racism. You guys know the story of Ruby Bridges? Probably you guys have seen that. This is one of the girls that was one of the first ones to desegregate the schools. She requires multiple security people just to protect her so she can go to school. Look at, she's tiny. But, Trey, stop, listen. But also, there were lots of teenagers who were the first ones, black teenagers, to go to white schools. Look at the people in the background of these pictures. These are people like me. These are white moms, and they are screaming at these teenagers. And then once they got into school, They were bullied. They were beaten up. They were hurt. They suffered greatly just because they wanted to be a black student in a previously white school. The stories are really sort of fantastic. Okay, you didn't all get this, but you mostly got this one. He wasn't in Memphis to give a speech. He was there because the sanitation workers, trash workers, they didn't get equal pay for equal work, and they basically were just asking for it. That's where these signs came from. You've seen the I am a man, can you please treat me like a human? That was the appeal with in 1968. And look at how the police and the security responded to them. They're not armed. They have signs that merely say, I am a man, I am human. They're marching peacefully, and look at how, and not just the guns, look what's in the background.
Tanks.
What? Yes, Liam?
Who's standing in between?
Just like a white guy who's marching with them. Just marching in support. You'll see that sometimes. Okay, so Dr. King was assassinated when he was down for this thing. The very last sermon he gave was done just before this, and I'm going to read you this quote to finish. He did not know he was going to get killed, but this is what he said. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountaintop. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. It was soon after this that Dr. King was assassinated. But that's not the end of the story. We'll get to the end of the story later. You guys have a good spring break.